Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Episode number 144 of Making It with me, your host, Terry Woolman. I really appreciate you joining us every week, and I'd like to thank Blue Microphones and Pearlman Microphones this week for their technical support in continuing to bring our show to you during this World Health pandemic. And I invite you to continue to stay mindful and safe as we work together as a global community to get through this. You can find all of our episodes on entertalkmedia.com, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or just go to terrywoolman.com/podcast. I hope you'll find my recent conversations with artists Bob James, Vale Johnson, Gino Vanelli, Boney James, Tony Basil, and Dr. Linda Spilker, Cassini project scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, inspiring, comforting, and entertaining. I created this show to focus on what it takes to create and maintain a lasting career in the ever-changing landscape of the entertainment business. So my guest today is Dave Pearlman. Dave Pearlman has been playing pedal steel and guitar since 1968 and has performed with such notable artists as Dan Fogelberg, Phil Everly, Bill Medley, The Lovin Spoonful, Chuck Berry, Hoyt Axton, REO Speedwagon, Bobby Womack, Leslie Gore, Pat Boone, Michelle Schock, Joe Walsh, Richie Furay, Jardine, Jesse Colin Young, Albert Lee, Terry Reid, and many others, as well as having been recorded on numerous film scores, television soundtracks, and commercials. He ran a successful recording studio for many years, engineering a Grammy-winning album, 4 gold albums, and 1 platinum album. Dave now owns and operates Pearlman Microphones, where he hand builds custom microphones for some of the top artists and studios in the world. Dave Pearlman, welcome to Making It.
Thank you, Terry. Great to be on your show.
It's great to have you, and thanks for making the time. I know that a lot of people's businesses and careers have been deeply impacted by this. I'm sure yours as well, but I know that you're still working.
Right. It's really amazing. When this all first started, when everything just shut down, it was like the beginning of March, which is my last live gig too was the end of February. So everything shut down the beginning of March. And I thought, oh man, I have no idea how we're going to get through because things are just going to close and people are freaking out. But to my surprise, and a bunch of other people in the audio manufacturing industry, for some reason, we're selling more product now than the first 3 or 4 months of the beginning of the year combined. Who knows? I mean, it could be that studios are closed. People aren't going into the major studios as much as they used to, and they are trying to upgrade their home recording studios and making that environment a little more professional. So they're actually buying a lot of stuff. So, okay.
That's really interesting. I'm glad to hear that. Are they leaning towards your higher end microphones or everything?
Really everything. And it's funny because, I have friends, over at Royer and A Designs and a bunch of the other companies, and everybody's telling me they're experiencing the same thing. People are spending money now and buying a lot of gear. So, okay. I'm happy.
Right now it looks like you're at home. You're not in your studio where you hand wire your microphones, and also you do your recording sessions from there as well.
Right. Okay. This isn't my home. Green screen, yeah. This is Dick Van Dyke's living room. There's the thing he trips over here.
Oh, that's right, the ottoman. That's perfect. Okay.
Da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, okay.
You know, I produced Dick Van Dyke for an HBO movie called If You're Not in the Obit, Eat Breakfast.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
We went to Capitol Studios and recorded. And
great.
If you haven't seen the movie, everybody go see it because it's fantastic.
I'll watch it after this.
But working with Dick Van Dyke was such a pleasure and thrill. He could swing.
Oh, yeah.
Man.
Talented guy. Very talented guy.
One of the sweetest celebrities that I've ever worked with. Is just great.
Nice.
So that's
very,
great. You've got
nice.
his living room. I love that.
Yeah, they found a color picture of it, and I lifted it off the internet.
That's perfect.
But I am not in the shop. No, my shop is exactly 6 miles from doorstep to doorstep. And one of the things interesting you bring that up too, that I really do try to make myself have a schedule and get up and shower and get dressed and go to the shop and build mics instead of it's so easy just to sit around in your pajamas and watch Netflix.
It's really, really important. I spoke to psychologist, Dr. Ron Ryder, and we were talking about the pandemic and mental health tips for artists. He said one of the most important things is to have a routine.
Well, and a discipline, a routine. Yes, exactly. So I really do try to get up and, populate some circuit boards or build a mic or two every day, get something prepared. And one of the things about that, actually, you and I were talking about that before. What was it? Prior preparation prevents piss poor performance.
The 5 Ps. Yes.
Well, it's actually 6 now. Prior preparation prevents piss poor performance.
The 6 Ps.
Yeah, I added one. What's nice about it, somebody there are a couple of international companies that will call me and we need 6 mics or we need 5 mics. We need so many mics. We need this mic and that mic. And they're already built up. I can just go and ship them that day. And my dealers appreciate that. I'm
sure. What's the biggest challenge for you right now with the pandemic?
I really have no challenges right now. I feel very fortunate, and I know I'm more fortunate than some others because this is just kind of how I've always done stuff. And as musicians too, as performers, it's just like, most of the time during the day, we're staying home and practicing, or we're writing, or we're doing other things or recording. So I'm not really, for me, there's not a whole lot of other things or different things that I'm doing. I'm very, very fortunate.
And what about your wife? How has this impacted her?
My wife, Lynn Finelli, was teaching vocals at Los Angeles College of Music in Pasadena, and they also closed down their physical site in March. And so they gave her all her students to teach on Zoom. So she's doing all of her teaching on Zoom. And what's nice about that is that she's home all the time. We're home together most of the time. And we're saving hundreds of dollars on gasoline. It doesn't have to drive to Pasadena, but
But aren't you making up for the difference financially by getting sushi every day for lunch?
Well, not every day. But last week we did order Thai food delivery like 2 or 3 times during the week. But it's one of those things, you order so much food you can have it for breakfast. So
I want to talk about today, of course, Pearlman Microphones and your company and how that came about. I also want to talk about your growing up in your family and what led you to becoming a touring multi-instrumentalist, guitarist, pedal steel player, banjo player, all the instruments that you play. But I want to just talk about a couple of things that I found interesting about you that you would let me know, which is, one is that you're a watch aficionado. And I think that's really cool. I own 3 watches and I love them. Right. I'm wearing one today in honor of this conversation. This was my dad's watch. It's a 1964 Wittnauer. That was
oh, nice.
Yes. And I just love having it because it helps me stay connected to, having lost my dad when I was a kid and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Watches are kind of like, they're machines. They have engines in them and they're really cool. So how did you get into watches and what's your favorite watch? And I just wanted to talk for a minute about watches because it intrigued me.
Sure. Well, I probably have a couple of 100 watches. I have so many watches. I've been collecting watches for 30 years, probably, maybe even more than that. But when I was really young, one of the things I did, like you said, they're little machines. They have little engines in them, and I wanted to know how they work. My dad bought us all, little, Sears watches when we were little kids, for $5 or $10 or something at the time. And, so I wanted to know what was in it. So I opened it up and took it apart. And of course, my dad said, well, now you have to put it back together. So I did.
And you were able to?
I was able to. I was very careful about disassembling it and taking notes. I might have been 11 or something, or 10 or 11 years old. And that started my lifelong love affair with wristwatches.
And engineering, I would imagine.
And engineering and building things, yeah.
Building and creating things.
Right.
That's really fascinating to me, because when I used to build models as a kid, I was the guy, and I loved doing it, but I was the one who always ended up with 3 extra parts that I didn't know where they went. Right. So it was not my calling to build things.
Yeah, you take the extra parts, you just glue them on the end somewhere and go, yeah, this is a custom build.
So tell me about growing up. How many siblings do you have, and were you encouraged to be musical in your family? Tell me about your mom and your dad.
Well, yeah, my mom and dad were both...
they were musicians, right?
They were musicians. My father had a little recording studio in Plainview, Texas in the 40s, where he had a small record cutter and a little, little setup, and he would record all his friends, playing classical and a little bit of jazz and actually reading poetry. And I have a little stack of acetates that were my dad's that he cut in Plainview, Texas. And it's so great. It's just so great. It's because, again, I have my dad's voice from the 40s. So he was born in 27. So in 47, he was 20, so it was just before that. So my dad's voice singing and talking and, playing a lot of music with his buddies. And it's very, very cool that I have that. And I think I was mentioning to you that the amplifier for the recording head for his machine, he later modified for me to be my first guitar amp in 1963. And it was a Thordarson mono thing. And it had volume and tone. It was just the head, and it's just amazing. He built a speaker cabinet for me, and that's the setup I used. I played in a Battle of the Bands at a Whitefront store in Northridge when I think I was still in elementary school. I was in 6th grade. Oh, you know what? It was because Sgt. Pepper had just come out. And we were playing against high school bands and college bands, and we were all these little kids, and everybody, oh, they're so cute. So for the consolation prize, they let us go into the store, and they said, you can pick any album you want. And I'm like, oh, Sgt. Pepper just came out. So I got one of the very first copies of Sgt. Pepper to be in the Valley at the
How
time.
Fantastic.
Right.
Do you still have it?
Of course, yeah, of course.
Wow, good.
Yeah. But my dad's amp, I have the amp still. The speaker cabinet has long since rotted away and it's gone. But like you were saying, one of the things, I started playing then, when the Beatles came out, and, I needed guitar cables. And one of the things my dad did was, he was also an audiophile and that kind of guy. He said, well, I won't buy you store-made guitar cables. He says, if you want guitar cables, you need to know how to make them, and taught me how to solder and tin wires and make my own guitar cables. And that's how that started.
It's so cool to hear you say that, because this is such a passion for you. I mean, it's fun for you. I mean, you're world class at it, but it's always felt like there are technical people that I've met before that don't get as excited as you do about.
I get excited.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Just about sound and audio and electrons and notes. And you're equally passionate as a player and as a designer, builder, engineer. And I appreciate that in you.
Well, the other side of that too, my mom, who was also a teacher before she got her degree to teacher, she's a double magna cum laude teacher, degree thing. She was part of the great folk scare of the 60s. So she went at the time San Fernando Valley State College, which became CSUN. And she did a show with Pete Seeger, and she did stuff with the Lomax family, and she was very, very tied into a bunch of that. So my father was listening to swing and some little bit of jazz and a lot of classical when we were growing up. My mother was, listening to bluegrass and folk music. So we got hammered from all the different sides. So that's, I think, probably where my love of that started.
There's another side of the story, too, that I read about you, which is when you were 3 years old, your dad was having you read drum charts. You were starting to learn to read music, and he taught you violin.
Right. My dad also played a little violin, and when I was in elementary school, I did play for 5 or 6 years, played violin. And my older brother, he kept up with the violin and ended up touring with the Yale University Symphony Orchestra. He's a great player. I gave it up, when I started leaning more into guitar and playing Beatles and Beach Boys and Everly Brothers, that kind of thing. But yeah, I kind of gave up the violin, but Dad had me reading rhythm charts and notation and stuff. And I've kind of let a lot of that go because as a pedal steel player, 99% of the time you're handed a chord chart. Nobody asks you to read lines really anymore. Sometimes I do some jingle dates where they do have a line thing and they give me a couple of minutes to work it out. And I go, I got this. Mm-hmm. So not that big of a problem.
I'm smiling because I read a description of pedal steel guitar and I wanted to know what you thought of this. It's actually a friend of yours had said this. I've heard pedal steel guitar described as a cross between an electric piano and a portable barbecue, which I thought was really funny.
Well, actually, you know what? My favorite one is the Prairie Theremin.
I was going to ask you how you would describe the instrument.
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea how to describe it to somebody. I have no idea. Prairie Theremin. Just go with that. And, it's funny, when I was super young, and playing violin, my mom used to take one of those white minute minders that you turn the time on it. And I had to practice half hour to 45 minutes every day.
With your Seth Thomas metronome?
Right. With the Seth Thomas metronome. We always wanted to just go out and play.
Right.
And then when I started getting into pedal steel, it really became my passion. And I was practicing 6 to 8 hours a day, every day.
How old were you when you started focusing on pedal steel?
I was 13.
Wow.
And so, from them saying, no, you can't go out to play, you have to practice, it went from that to, damn it, go out and play, stop practicing. So, my mom tells stories about how she would come in at, midnight and I would have my amp would be on and buzzing and I'd be fast asleep with my head on the guitar and she'd, take my picks off and turn my amp off and stuff. But, that pays off, that kind of dedication. That was my passion and it paid off.
I would say that your second instrument, correct me if I'm wrong, would be guitar and then maybe banjo after that.
Well, I think, it's pedal steel is my main instrument. I play a lot of dobro as well. So a lot of slide. I do a lot of lap steel. Guitar I do as well. And then the rest of the stuff is the Tommy Tedesco method, where I think it was his first book where people call and go, hey, do you play balalaika?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do. He goes, go out and buy one and you tune it like a guitar and you go do the date. So most of the other things I list are that. So like I have my mandolin is tuned like a guitar, mm-hmm. and I've gone and done mandolin things, you can trill and you can play single note things and nobody knows. So
Dean Parks had given me some really great advice about the mandolin, which is to have two. So one of them is tuned as a guitar so that you can read.
Right.
If you get called to do something specific, but also to learn to play it in the traditional tuning so that you can get the true essence of the instrument. So I do have both.
That's a great idea. Absolutely great idea. Yeah. Because a lot of times when you're on the spot and, somebody throws a chart in front of you and you're with a bunch of guys and you're doing a jingle date or a film date or whatever, and somebody counts it off and you're going, oh, geez, what tuning am I in? What's the fingering? And I go, on those dates, it's always the guitar tuning thing because I don't want to have to stop and think.
Tell me about pedal steel because I play lap steel, or I play with lap steel.
Yeah.
I haven't done it outside of the house, but certainly for home recording. But do you have one favorite tuning, or how do you maneuver through open tunings? Because I play a lot of alter tunings on guitar, right, and it's definitely a mind expansion to do that.
I play a standard pedal steel tuning, an E9 pedal steel tuning. It's very standard. I've kind of made up some of my pedals are a little bit wonky from other people's guitars, but the tuning is very standard. Well, you remind me of another story real quick. This was in the 70s. I was doing a session. Do you remember the old RCA building on Ivar? I think it was on Ivar.
I moved here in 81, but yes, I do remember.
Oh, okay. And I was doing a session in one of the rooms. And at the time, this is in the 70s, we all smoked cigarettes. You probably didn't, but I did. Not. Of course you did. I know you didn't. But I went out in the lobby to have a smoke. And I'm sitting here with all these raggedy guys are sitting. I'm just sat between them. And I'm like looking around. And I'm like, oh man, these guys look so familiar. Oh, who is this? And it's just like I go, oh my God, this is Keith Richards. I'm sitting next to Keith Richards and oh my God, it's Charlie Watts. I'm like, ah. So, you go, take the shot. So I took out one of my business cards and I handed it to Keith Richards and I said, I'm a pedal steel player. I'm doing a session in B. You guys are in A. And I go, if you ever need a pedal steel player, here's my number. And he turns to me and he says, Ron Woods plays pedal steel. And I leaned over to Keith and I said, well, Ron Woods has a pedal steel.
Did he
but, take the shot. Yeah,
right.
Of course he did. And he put my card in his pocket. He was laughing and stuff. But you take the shot.
Yeah, you do. Yes, I can. Yes, I do.
Yes, I do. Yes, I can.
And then you figure out how to do it.
Exactly.
By the way, just a quick aside. I don't want to make this about me, but you were saying, of course, you don't smoke cigarettes. There's a reason for that. And it's kind of a funny one. My parents smoked when we were growing up in the 60s, and as so many people did. I asked my dad if I could try his cigarette one time. I was, 6 years old. And he said, yeah, come here. Here's how you do it. And he said, you want to take it and put it in your mouth and inhale as hard as you can.
Oh no.
And I almost passed out and turned green and never had a desire to smoke after that because it made me really ill. And he thought it was hysterical. I was really upset, but I was never interested in smoking tobacco after that.
Good for you. And see, my parent, the complete opposite. Neither of my parents smoked or drank or totally straight. I never heard my father use a swear word ever. And here's a guy who was in the Navy. It's like, really? Okay.
So you talked about learning to play Everly Brothers and Beatles and things like that. And then you end up touring with the Everly Brothers.
Well, I was in Phil's band. I did one thing with Don, but I played a lot with Phil. I'm on one of his records and we did a bunch of gigs together. He was just the nicest, most wonderful guy. And I used to go to his house. He lived in Toluca Lake, very close to where I was living. And we used to rehearse in his garage, or he had like a little rec room next to the garage, actually. And I used to go just a little bit early sometimes to rehearsal. And, Phil'd be in his living room and there'd be a bunch of guitars around. And so I'd pick up a guitar and I'd start playing like, Kathy's Clown or something and start singing. And it was like, oh my God, I'm singing Kathy's Clown with Phil Everly.
It's pretty surreal, isn't it? I mean, it feels very natural and right, but it's also kind of crazy when you have the opportunity to work with people and create music with people that you grew up listening to, that it's in our DNA.
Exactly. And it was just such a thrill for me always. And another songwriter, a guy named Casey Kelly, who was writing with Phil, got me into the band. And it was just a great band. Joey Page, on bass, Vern Bohannon on drums. Oh, and what was the piano player's name? A woman. She was so good. I just can't remember her name all of a sudden. But yeah, just sitting there doing the old songs with the guy. He's the guy, and okay.
How did you transition from playing in bars and restaurants to touring with major artists?
Well, it was one of those, just amazingly fortunate things. I was in a band, and at the time we were playing the late 60s, 70s country rock, early 70s country rock stuff. And one of the songs we did we were doing 2 or 3 Dan Fogelberg songs in this band. And a friend of mine, Doug Livingston, who was in the band at the time, he left Dan Fogelberg's band to go play with Donna Summers. I think he was getting the MD job with Donna, and told me that they were holding auditions down at SIR. So I called up and I made an appointment to go do the thing. And the first song they called, they said, well, do you know this song? And it was just one of the songs that I've been doing in this band. And I knew the song backwards and forwards. I said, sure, let's do it. So we did the intro, played the first verse and chorus, and then the manager just starts waving us off like this. Yeah. And I go, I mean, you know how you get when an audition is something important and you start like, God, am I going to start crying? Oh God, did I screw it up? What did I do? Oh my God, this is my big shot. And he goes, yeah, we've heard enough. And I'm like starting to freak out. My heart's like, and he picks up the phone and he goes, yeah, cancel all the other guys. And we found somebody. And right there on the spot, they handed me an itinerary, and that was my first gig. I was 20.
Was Dan at that audition?
No, it was the Fool's Gold band. It was the backup band, and Pat Cully, John Barrack, the guys from the management and frontline management. It was Irving Azoff,
Sure.
And yeah.
By the way, you mentioned Fool's Gold, one of my favorite all-time bands. They really influenced me as a player and producer. Just sonically, everything was so spot on. For all the listeners, if you don't know who Fool's Gold is, try to find them. Although the early albums aren't really streaming, are they?
I don't know. There were 2 records. They did 2 records, and Doug played the steel on the records, because the second record, I was on the road with Hoyt Axton when they did the second record with Keith Olsen.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a special thanks, but I didn't make it to the recording. Oops.
So I was a huge Dan Fogelberg fan. Do you have any standout memories of working with Dan?
There are a couple of things. I mean, he was just a great guy and so talented and really, really nice. There were a couple of things. One thing is one of my big standout memories. We were in Atlanta, Georgia, and we were, it was one of those things where we'd done this big show in front of a big crowd, and everybody just like, no, well, what do you want to do? And some of the guys, I'm going to bed and this. And Dan said, oh, I feel like partying and running around. So he and I jumped in a car and drove around, and we ended up, I think it was the Great Southeastern Music Hall in Atlanta, Georgia. You know that joint?
No.
And Nitty Gritty Dirt Band was playing,
mm-hmm.
and we kind of pounded on the stage door and got them to let us in. And they had us go up on stage with them for the encore.
Wow.
And so I played John McEwen's Steel, and Dan picked up a guitar, and we played like 3 or 4 songs with the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, which was an absolute blast. But one of the things that was really great, I think we were in Colorado. It was Colorado, and there was a place called the Red Something Inn, the Red. I don't, who
mm-hmm.
remembers?
It's a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, and he was talking to George Martin about producing the next record. So we all went to dinner with George Martin.
I was going to ask you, I knew you had a George Martin dinner story. Yeah. That's how that happened?
And that's how it happened. And we had a private room, and they sat George at the head of the table, and then we all sat on the sides. And it was just like magic. First of all, it's one of those things like, at the time, that's the closest to meeting a Beatle, and I just remember he was just the most wonderful, generous polite British gentleman guy, and we were there for hours. We just had a wonderful chat and a wonderful meal, and it was really great. And of course, later I found out that, a friend of mine, Brian Kehew, who wrote a book called Recording the Beatles, has some tapes of them in the studio that a lot of people haven't heard, and they are not polite British gentlemen. We don't want to talk about that, but
another mutual friend of ours, I believe, is Joe Vitale, drummer, who played on some of the early Fogelberg records. Did you get to tour or record with him?
Never. No, Joe wasn't around when I was working. It was Ron Grinnell, who was with a band called Kindred for a long time and played with Joe Walsh. He was the drummer. And then another drummer named Kelly Shanahan, who had been with Boz for a while. Both incredible drummers, really, really great guys and great players. I remember one time Ron Grinnell, we did a thing, this was in the 70s. It was all about practical jokes and stuff. A lot were played on me as well. But one time Ron used to do this thing where they'd announce him, he'd come running on stage waving and the crowd would cheer, and he'd jump on his drum stool and grab his sticks and count off the first song and start playing. So this was when hot glue guns had just become extremely popular, and we glued all of Ron's sticks together. So it was just this big clump of wood. So,
and that's the kind of thing you would get fired from a tour if you ever did anything like that now. But in those days, it was different, I guess.
Oh, it was different. I came in, we'd been out partying and I was a little bit drunk. I came into my hotel room and everything in my room was glued to the ceiling. There was Richard Bowden. I don't know if you know Richard Bowden, great guitar player, played with Linda Ronstadt and a bunch of folks and stuff. He was the practical joke king. So, in the bathroom, the toilet seats glued down and my toothbrush and hairbrush glued down. And
there's one other artist that I want to ask you about before we get into your studio that you used to have. And then, of course, Pearlman Mics. Bobby Womack, not a name that I would think that you would be associated with as a pedal steel player.
Very strange. Yeah, he did a song. This is during the I'm Looking for a Love tour. Mm-hmm. And he actually had Sneaky Pete had played on the record, and I don't remember who recommended me for the gig, but we went and did some rehearsing, and we did a bunch of shows with the OJs. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of weird, and it was charts, and it was notated, and it's like play here for a bar and count the next 32 bars resting, and and of course this was 1970. Maybe was it 70? Maybe 74 or somewhere in that pocket. So, I was really skinny and I was wearing a silver lame suit and platform shoes. And we all had acoustic 360 amps behind us.
Wow.
Everybody in the band had acoustic 360s. Mm-hmm. It was, that was a thing. That was a very short-lived gig. Because, it didn't really fit that well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's talk about your studio that you used to have called Roton Rascal.
Well, the way that started, again, doing a bunch of gigs with a bunch of really good artists. And one of the things that I found out that I really wasn't that suited for being gone from home for so long.
Why?
I didn't, it's one of those things where, you have a wife, and you have pets, and you have a home.
When did you and Lynn get married?
Well, we're just very recent. We got married in 2012, so we're very recent. But so you go away for 5-6 months, and you come home, and you go, oh yeah, where are the plates again? And why is the dog growling at me? And
touring used to be that you would be gone for 7, 8, 9 months out of the year. It
right.
wasn't like it is now, where you go out for 3-4 weeks. 8 weeks, come home.
Exactly. And then you're living out of a suitcase, and people go, oh, you were in London? How'd you like London? You go, well, I got off the plane. I saw a car. We went to the hotel. I was in the hotel for an hour. We drove to the venue. We did sound check. I drove back to the hotel, took a nap,
right?
Showered, got dressed, did the gig, came home, got in the car, went to the airport.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know how London was, right?
I have no idea. And that was for like every city. You just go, airport, car, hotel, gig. That's it for the most part.
So you wanted to change. It was a conscious decision.
I wanted to stay home. And I'd already just, we had gone into writing and stuff. I remember one of the, again, back to my dad. My dad had one of those, I think it was the Akai sound on sound with the little wheel in the front where you'd switch the wheel and you could record onto a previous track. So besides having his acetates too, my father also had a wire recorder, which I also still have. I have all the original wire equipment, and I had the Akai that would switch over. So I was already splicing tape when I was a kid and doing all that. So I think I started with that. It was like a 3340 or something, an old TIAC.
I had that.
Yeah, and then we went to that goofy Porta Studio thing that Tascam had, and then it was like, well, this isn't cutting it. I better get a proper 8-track, and and then you go, if people are coming over, I might as well get a proper compressor and some good reverb. I better buy a good mic, and so it just started. Now I need a 16-track. Now I need 24-track. Now I'm building a proper 1,500 square foot studio, and the next thing you know, I'm a studio. And that lasted for 27 years.
Was it natural for you to run a business, or was that a skill that you needed to learn along the way?
Yeah, I'm not that much of a business person per se, but, my love was with the gear. I loved working the gear. I loved engineering. I loved splicing tape. I loved, the effects, mixing, the microphones. That was my passion. I really loved all of that. And that's...
You also love people. Like you enjoy... No?
No.
You'd rather be by yourself?
Not so much. People, not a big fan.
Yeah, overrated.
Very overrated. Some people, yes. Most of the people, I was running a commercial room, so, there'd be times when I'd get, a speed metal band of 17-year-old kids with their parents, going, tapping me on the shoulder going, you need to bring the drums up a little bit. I'm like, yeah, no, go away. But that's how the microphone thing started. I was learning, I had a couple of really, really good techs, and they were all named Dave Gallo and Dave Brown. And tech time was costing me $175 to $150 an hour, which is a lot of dough. You bring a guy in to fix your board or to fix some things, and all of a sudden you're working for free for the day. And, from my electronics background with my father, I learned how to read schematics better. And I bought every electronics book I could find on the internet, stuff from the 40s and 50s, because I was into more of the tube electronics. And I taught myself how to modify and repair microphones, as well as doing repairs on my board. I had an old Quad 8 console, and I would do repairs on the board and modifications on the gear. And then I thought, you know what? If I could build a bunch of these tube mics, it would almost be like a client magnet where I could advertise the studio, where I've got, I have 10 custom built tube microphones like U47s. We can use tube mics on everything. And sure enough, it worked. It was a huge client magnet. And the problem was that people would do vocal tracks on my mics and go, man, what is this mic? It sounds great. And I go, well, I built it in the tech room of the studio. And they go, well, can I buy it? And I'd say, I guess I'll just go make another one. And that word got out, and I just started selling mics out of the tech room of the studio.
So it was kind of accidental?
It was accidental.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
In a way, yeah, accidental. And then I started thinking like, well, wait a minute, I'm not asking enough money for these mics. And I started raising the price a little bit and getting it. And then I started realizing that, the amount of time and energy and business, like you said, of running the studio and working the studio, I could make that much money working for a few hours on the microphones as opposed to working 15 hours in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a no-brainer. And I'd been collecting instruments and recording gear, old tube compressors and tube pre's and things like that since the 70s. So I just kind of parted out my studio. I had one of the largest collection of old RCA ribbon mics. I was doing a lot of jazz dates, lots and lots of horn dates. So I had all this stuff, and it really financed the new business. I opened the microphone business and invested in mass quantities of parts and started that.
Mm-hmm. What is your most popular or highest selling mic? I know that the one that has been getting a lot of attention is the Church.
Well, you know what? The big selling mic is the TM1, which is the first mic I started building. That's what built the business, and it sells like hotcakes. But the Church is really doing well. And you had mentioned Al Schmidt to me earlier, and you know what? Al is just the nicest, sweetest guy. He mentioned me in his new book. I had no idea he was going to do that, and I was just like, when I got the book, I ordered it on Amazon, how you pre-order the book. So it showed up at my house the first day of release. And I'm like, oh, I got Al Schmidt's new book. And I'm flipping through it and I go, oh, that looked like one of my mics. How weird. And I flipped back and I went, oh, that's one of my mics. And he's just been helping, and he's just so sweet. He wrote that he uses, at Capitol, he sets up the original Frank Sinatra U-47. He said Browner made him a custom mic, and he uses my Church. And it's just like, I can't thank him enough for that. So I've been selling mics because of that too.
Yeah, Al Schmidt is one of a kind. He's loved by everybody that I know who's ever worked with him. I think he's such a great guy.
Yeah. The only thing he did chastised me for putting my feet on the console. He saw a picture of me, like from the 80s, and I was like asleep in my chair, but I had my feet on the armrest, and everybody's going, don't let Al see this.
I want to read a description of the TM1. The Perlman Tm1 microphone was designed by and is handmade by Dave Perlman. It is a high-quality microphone made for professional studio use, but priced for the home recordist.
Right.
This is not an assembly line microphone. Each unit is hand-wired, point-to-point, and voltage-tuned for maximum performance. That's some old-school craftsmanship that is lacking in every area of our life, it seems, these days.
Yeah, it's one of those things where originally, like some of the original prototypes and some of the original microphones that went out were built on perf board. So, it's got little holes in it, and you can make your own circuit in it. And, I was experimenting, so I didn't have printed circuit boards made. And I had a couple of people mention that they loved that I was doing it that way because it was old school and it wasn't just a, cheapo printed circuit board made overseas and brought in and done like that. So I just kept doing that. There's a place here called PhotoFab that cuts the cards for me and just drills holes, but there aren't any traces, so it's not a printed circuit board. I put the real capacitors and real resistors in and twist the leads and solder them together. I think it's going to last a lot longer than some printed circuit boards are really super high quality, but some fail, and it may or may not contribute to the sound.
Where can people buy these mics? And also, do you mind just giving the price range of the TM?
Well, the TM1 is $1,760. The Church is $3,300. I also make a 250 that is $3,300. I also make a small version of the TM1, which is called the TM2, which I get $1,050 for. There are a couple other models I don't remember, but yeah, they can buy direct off my website, which is PearlmanMicrophones.com. Mm-hmm. But I also have a bunch of dealers all over the world. Vintage King is one of my big dealers here. There are a bunch of guys. Zen Pro Audio is a big dealer of mine. Great guys.
You also have dealers in Europe and other parts of the world as well, no?
I do, right.
So you're easy to find.
Yes.
One more question about the TM1. Would you say that it's a really great all-round microphone for a home studio, or certainly a pro studio, but great for vocals, for acoustic instruments, for even percussion and drums? Can it handle the transients of a snare drum?
Yeah, but I would say it's probably not the best choice for a snare drum, but people use them for overheads. They do that.
That makes sense.
But yeah, one of the things, like the TM1 has cardioid and omni for pattern selector. And one of the things that I do that no other microphone guys are doing is I have a high cut switch. It cuts at about 3K. And I've been told that it makes the mic sound a little ribbony in a way. So it becomes very versatile. If you have, a certain instrument you don't want high end, or you want it to be more of a vintage sound, that it will do that. And the reason I put that on is because in the very beginning, in the, when in the 90s and stuff, when some of the Chinese mics were coming in, a lot of them had this really brittle high mid thing going on. And that was done to combat some of the capsules that were coming in from China. And I've since gone to making my own capsules, but I've left the switch on and people love it. So we're going with it. Oh, and by the way, about the church mic again, too, T-Bone Burnett, when he was producing Elton John, they ended up using my mic for Elton John's last record in a blind test.
That's fantastic.
Which I'm very proud of that too. It's a good sounding record.
Let's switch gears for a second. One of the many things that you do is mentor and teach, and you teach a class called Vocals for Producers.
Well, it's actually my wife Lynn's class, and once a quarter she brings me in to teach the kids. Sometimes I do an hour, sometimes 2 hours. The last one we did was 2 hours. And one of the things we do, we talk about microphone choices, different types of microphones, microphone placements, making a singer feel comfortable, getting a good vocal out of a singer, what to do if a singer is singing pitchy, headphone mixes. I talk about producers and engineers. One of the things we really like to talk about, and I said, even as a session player, but absolutely as a producer, it's like if the session's at noon and you're on time at noon, you're already late. You're late. So they go, well, no, it's noon. I'm there. No. You're late already. 11:30 at the latest. You need to be ready. And especially for the stringed instruments as well, like with pedal steel is even worse because I want it to sit in the room.
They need to acclimate to the temperature.
Exactly.
And settle in. And you need to settle in as an artist, as a performer.
Exactly. And I talk about the importance of, guys go, oh, I want to be a producer. And I go, can you write charts? And they go, no. And I go, well, you're going to need to do that. And I go, even if it's just simple chord charts, you need to know how to write repeats and DSs and codas, and you need to know how to write all this stuff because you need to show up when you have a room full of 5 or 6 guys tracking, and somebody goes, well, should we come in on bar 4? And you go, I don't know. Well, you're going to suck as a producer. You need to be prepared. We're back to being prepared.
The 6 Ps.
The 6 Ps. And again, just about having a relationship with an engineer, unless you are the engineer producer. So it actually goes pretty quickly. The first time I did it, I did not like an hour. What am I going to talk about? I have no idea what I'm doing. And all of a sudden you realize you've gone an hour and you're going over and they're giving you the cutoff sign. And, I go, what I didn't finish.
Can you give me an example of a tip that you would give in your class dealing with singers and they are singing flat? What's your approach?
Well, one of the things you do for me, it's like a lot of times it can be attributed to a headphone mix.
Right.
So, and I will tell people if they have their headphones on, and you'll see a lot of singers squishing their headphones onto their ears and you go, yeah, don't do that. Pull one of your headphones off. You want to hear yourself in the room. You want to feel feel the note in your bones.
Right.
That's how you're going to get in pitch. And we'll just like, let me change the headphone mix a little bit for you. Maybe you're pushing to catch up to the headphones, or maybe you're doing something. But there are a lot of things you can do. One of the things that we've done is you get people to raise their arms. When you raise your arms, it opens up your chest cavity. Mm-hmm. And you can take a big, deep breath, and that will help push air. And as a singer, so I learned this from my wife, is teaching me most of this stuff too. But we get to teach the kids, little tricks like that. But mainly in this class, it's really more about relaxing. Getting a person, like you said, acclimated to the room. Is it too bright in here? Would you like me to light a candle? Do you want a glass of water? Would you like tea? Is it too cold? Is it too warm? You want that person to feel like they are comfortable and trusting you, because giving it a performance as an instrumentalist, is very emotional. But when you're a singer, I'll say it's way more emotional, and you are more vulnerable. So you need to make that person feel as comfortable and as trusting as absolutely possible. And you're not going to get a great performance out of them if they're upset or uptight. So that's a pretty important thing. Also, I tell them, with Pro Tools, I'm just like, one of the things I tell them too, especially on a vocal date, a lot of guys don't do this, but this is very important. You have your Pro Tools engineer, and you push enter to make a mark on the track when the tracks are going by. First verse, bing, first chorus, bing, da 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 da. And you have a lyric sheet ready, and you're looking over the shoulder of the engineer. You're writing down timestamps on every line of that lyric sheet. So you don't have to go, take me to the middle of the first verse, and the engineer's going, I don't know where that is. You go, take me to 1 minute and 37 seconds. And, every line, everybody's got the same sheet with the numbers. Everybody knows where to go.
So you're talking about being proactive and being hyper aware as to how to be of service to the music and to the artist, so that everybody can focus on the creative process.
Exactly. Because one of the things, as a singer or a player, I'm sure like, do you remember ADATs?
Yes.
When ADATs, and they would stack them up and have 3 or 4, and it would take 5 minutes for them to all sync up, and you're ready to play. You're trying to punch in, and it's like 5 minutes just goes by, and you go, I've lost it. I have no idea. The vibe's gone.
Right.
But the same thing for a singer, especially if you go, I just want to go back a few bars. Don't take me back to the beginning of the song. Take me back to the beginning of the line, and we're going to punch. Just take me back 2 bars. It's the same thing. I'm sure you've done the same thing. Like, I don't need to go back 20 bars. Take me back 2 bars. I know where I am. And that will make that session go by more smoothly.
That brings me to a question. I had read that you are not really a fan of electronics, sequenced. You like human beings playing music. That's more your jam. And one of the things about that I found with technology, and I love technology, and I know you do too.
Right.
But when I've been in a studio, I guess the point I'm getting ready to make is just because you can doesn't mean you should. In other words, somebody will say, hey, can you just come in? I want to punch that one chord in, just come in a little bit on top of the beat. You were right on the money. I want to push it a little bit. And you go, sure. And the engineer starts going, no, I could do it in Pro Tools. And you're waiting the 3 minutes, even if it's 3 minutes instead of 10 minutes, for them to do it. I'm sitting right here. I can just punch me in.
Exactly. Exactly.
And again, you sort of lose the intention of what you're doing. You lose the vibe.
The momentum, everything just stops. Yeah.
I found that a little frustrating, but mostly humorous when the technology became more popular and you'd just be sitting there. It'd be so much easier just to let a person do their job.
Exactly. It's funny. One of the things I also tell guys, I said, like when I was recording, and, I worked with tape most of my life, but, Pro Tools is the same thing. It's still a red button situation, and I go, if you're in there and you're let's say you're just the engineer and there's a producer, or if you're the producer, engineer, whatever, and somebody is standing in the room in front of a microphone, you have your finger on the button at all times. And sometimes people aren't going to say, hey, I'm going to sing now. You just see them go, they taking a breath, that button goes down, because if you don't get the take.
Right. Well, that goes back to what we were saying. It's really about taking initiative and being selfless, not selfish, not self-centered, but really looking and paying attention to everything from what bar you're on and what counter number to when somebody's inhaling or somebody's getting ready to, they go up before they go down to hit the drum. You want to make sure you catch all of that.
Exactly. I once seconded behind Hank Sakala, who was brilliant guy. And we did something happen and he turned to me, he goes, they don't call this a listening studio. It's a recording studio.
Note taken. I'm sure you never forgot that.
Never. He's a great guy.
Yeah. I met him early on.
Oh man, amazing. And it's like, I learned a lot of stuff from him. We didn't work together that long of a period, but man, you just picked up stuff when you work with these guys who've been doing it all their lives. And it's just, oh my gosh, it's just amazing. You can't pay for that kind of knowledge.
As a session player, which you still do, what's your most favorite thing about recording and what's your least favorite when you are a session player, not an engineer or producer?
Well, it's kind of tough right now to answer that because, I haven't actually been physically in a studio that much recently because all of my stuff I do here. So guys will send me an MP3 or a wave stereo track with click, at the top, and they'll send me a chart and they go, do 3 or 4 passes and give me one with a lot of stuff. Give me one with a little bit of stuff. Give me one if you hear like a hook lick, do a hook, and and again, it's like I've been doing it. My first time in the studio, I was 11. So I've been doing it for a while, and you kind of have a pretty good idea of what a client is looking for. So, and I'll do that. I'll do 3, 4 tracks, and they send them the tracks. So for me now, again, back to that thing where I really don't like people that much. So I get to work by myself. And even though self-production sometimes is a little hard, but you get to go like, I don't like when I would be in the studio and I'd play a lick and a guy'd go, well, let me listen to that back. And I'd go, oh, no, it sucks. Let's just redo it. And he'd go, no, I want to hear it. And you're going, okay, well, I guess we're stopping. So I'm going to sit back in my chair. So we've stopped the momentum of the session. And the producer's going, well, let me hear it again.
Yeah, what do you think? I don't know.
Let me hear it again. And it's like, dude, no, stop. It's wrong. Let me just. So I get to do that alone now. I get to make those decisions. And I do like that a lot.
I want to ask you a personal question, but it's kind of fun. You had told me this has to do with live performance, and I would think that this is not something you would do when you're recording, especially working for somebody else, but you've done some gigs on acid when you were younger. Was that an amazing experience? I mean, did it actually give you another layer of perspective and awareness that you've brought into the rest of your playing?
Well, I think so. Maybe.
Right.
But yeah, there was this one time where I had accidentally taken a couple of hits of blotter cleaning out the freezer portion of our old freezers. Remember when they used to freeze up and you'd have to take a chisel and a hairdryer to defrost them? And I found some there, been there for years. And I went, well, I'll just take it. It was the 70s. And I do remember that I was on stage and it was kind of towards the first set of this gig. And I was rocking out. I was just having a great time. And I thought, I'm playing pedal steel and I'm thinking like I'm seeing the strings as a runway and the bar, my hand in the bar was this plane coming in for a landing on the runway. And I was just going through all these visuals and playing really great and having a wonderful time. And then it occurred to me that I wasn't quite sure, and I grabbed the guitar player's shirt and I tugged on his shirt, and he leaned over and I said, "Is my amp on?" It's just one of those nights.
And there you have it, kids.
And there you have it, kids.
Don't take drugs.
Or do. And then one other time I was on tour. I was playing with David Carradine, the Kung Fu, and we were out with Ramblin' Jack Elliott and Bonnie Bramlett, and we were in Maui, and we were going to play the Inside Diamond Head for the Crater Festival. It was New Year's Day, 1974. And we were staying up. There's a guy named Red Shepard who was involved with the first production of Hair, I guess, in the late 60s. And he had a ranch in Hana. And he had built a stage for us to rehearse. And we're in the middle of this jungle atmosphere. It was just absolutely beautiful. And they had some absolutely pure liquid LSD, and we all took a bunch. That was fun.
It sounds a little overwhelming, but really kind of cool in a way, too.
Well, and the first time I met David, I had been in a rock and roll band with a guy named Dewey Martin, who was the drummer for Buffalo Springfield. And he and I were in this rock and roll band and playing all over town and doing all this stuff. And one day, Dewey said, do you want to meet David Carradine? And I said, oh, that'd be great. He goes, well, we're having a little jam. Do you want to jam with Carradine? Great. So Dewey had this old beat up station wagon, and we had his drums, and we threw my steel and my amp and everything in the back of his station wagon. And we were driving. And we're going up through Burbank, and we're up in the hills of Burbank. And all of a sudden we're at the Starlight Bowl in Burbank. And I go, I thought you said we were going to jam. You go, well, yeah, it's a jam, but it's just in front of a crowd. Like, oh, okay. And sure. So we get up and we start unloading our stuff, and we're setting up on stage at the Starlight Bowl, and people are starting to file in and stuff. And, Carradine's like looking at his watch and like, oh my God, we're going to be late. And they're looking at this stuff. And all of a sudden this other car comes speeding into the backstage area. And this guy jumps out of the car, and he's got this big tinfoil package, and he runs up to Carradine and he hands it to him. And this guy just got off an airplane from Hawaii, and he had fresh psilocybin mushrooms. And Carradine had us all line up, and he put them in our mouth and stuff. Yeah, okay. So I'm taking psilocybin with Carradine and Dewey and a bunch of the guys and stuff. And then I go, oh, wait a minute. I'm walking on stage to do a show. And I said, what songs are we doing? I had no idea. I have never heard any of his stuff. I had no idea. And he just goes, don't worry, you're going to be fine. Okay.
And so, were you?
Maybe.
maybe not.
Maybe. I got the gig.
Those are great stories.
Oh, I know. I can't believe I'm still alive after.
That's something I've heard before from some of my other guests who were there in the 60s and 70s doing this.
Oh, yeah.
There's a gratitude for still being alive and healthy, and generally not a regret for those experiences.
Well, there were a couple of times. One in particular, I was on the East Coast with Dewey Martin and Bruce Palmer, who was also playing bass with Buffalo Springfield, and we were doing a little mini tour, and we'd kind of done. People used to show up and give us little bags of cocaine and stuff, and we kind of overdid it a couple of times. And there was one time I didn't think I was going to make it.
That sounds terrifying.
It's extremely terrifying, and it's why I stopped.
Okay.
Yeah. And I could have gone on the other side and not been here.
That's right.
So that's why I stopped. It was because of that. And you just go, I'm glad I'm alive.
I'm glad you're alive too.
But they were fun gigs.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
They were really great gigs.
Dave, before I get to my closing questions, I just wanted to ask you a personal question, which is, what has changed about your perspective in life as you've gotten older?
Well, it's funny. When you're young and you're in your 20s, and things seem really important, and you kind of have things to prove, and you want to be right a lot, and And, in your relationships as well as in your career, all of those things apply. And I think I've got to the point where, if there are a lot of things people say, what would you change? What do you regret? What if you could go back and change? I think I would say there were times in my career where that got in my way, where I needed to be right, or I needed to, prove to somebody something. And when you look back on, you go, oh, that stuff's not important. Nobody cares. What's really important is now, your friends and your relationships with people. And if you don't get a gig because you didn't kiss up to somebody, that's not important. You just go, I'm moving on. I don't need that one. So, and even the money, it's like, there were times where you go, well, I got to do this for the money. And then you go, really, what was $100 in the scheme of things, or $500 even, or whatever, how much money? You go, what does that mean now? Nothing. So I let a lot of that stuff go now.
My closing questions that I ask all of my guests, I've got 3 questions. And the first is, since this show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally?
Well, I almost kind of just answered that.
Yeah, you did.
Making it in your marriage and with your friends, and, again, helping people, being thankful for things you have. Again, I've been super fortunate for the gigs I've had and where I've got. I mean, I have worked really hard, and I've been prepared. When they say when opportunity knocks, if you're prepared, that helps. But I've been very fortunate, and I think, making it means, that I have been fortunate enough that I've never done anything else. I've always been involved in music in some way. I've never had like any kind of a job. But again, like keeping my wife happy and helping out my friends. And I'm glad I'm in a position to be able to do that. And I think that is making it all around. I think that's the important stuff.
Those are beautiful things to say. And I agree with you. I think that is what is important.
That's what's important. Yeah.
It leads to my next question, which you've kind of answered as well, but let me just ask anyway. Can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Well, again, yeah, be prepared. So, go for the job you want and be ready for it. One of the things you and I had discussed before, when I go on stage, with a certain act, it's like, I don't want to show up and they go, well, go to the chart. And I didn't bring my charts. I don't, no, be ready to go, be prepared, know your parts. One thing, one of my guys told me when I was still a teenager, and I wish I'd have listened to him a little bit more. He said, keep your mouth shut. So I think that's one of my tips. And I'll even say that I wish I'd done it a little more. Keep your mouth shut. Be prepared. Just be nice to everybody.
My closing question, Dave, and then I'll give you last thoughts if there's anything else you want to add. At this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self if you could?
Go into plastics. I don't know. What was that from? Oh, The Graduate.
Right,
remember?
Right, I do.
Plastics. I have one word for you. Plastics. I don't know. The road for everybody is different. That path, and I don't know. I'm just, we've all had ups and downs, and as performers and players, and now I'm doing the microphones. It's like it's just an adventure, and we've had disappointments, we've had great times. It's just an adventure. So I would just say, no matter what, just enjoy the adventure. What else can you do?
There's also a blessing in what you said, that you have never had a regular job, because the interesting thing about hosting this show over the last 3 years is that anybody who's been on the show is successful at what they do, and successful meaning that they're passionate, they love it, They have become very good at it, and their point of view is interesting. They also, most of them are financially successful, but that's just part of the package that comes along with everything else. You've been blessed to just do music your whole life. And I would say maybe about half the people who have been on the show have had to do other jobs, myself included, along the way, where there's a lean year. We're in a pandemic right now, and there are a lot of people who are packing up shop. They're moving. They're trying to figure out what is next or how to reinvent themselves. And these are, I'm not going to mention names, but these are people that you know. These are people you've seen on TV. You've heard them on records. You've gone to their concerts. And I just applaud you. And I think it's great that your dad and mom brought you up to be curious and to get good, to practice being good at things, because it's afforded you a really interesting life.
Yeah, that's true. It's all their fault.
I blame them. Well,
thank you. I know what you're saying. Yes, I do know. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to close with?
Oh, I don't know. We've covered quite a bit of stuff. I don't know. Just like I said, have fun. Just have fun. And do what you love. It's like, somebody says, what do you say? If you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life, something like that. I don't remember. I'm paraphrasing, but yeah. I love going to work. I love sitting in my shop. I love making microphones. I love it. I love playing the pedal steel. I love doing sessions. I love going out and doing gigs. I love it.
And you love your wife.
And I love my wife and our cat and our house. So we're all good.
It's Dave Pearlman Mics. We'll post the website again so everybody can see it, but It's a Google away. Go check it out. And I encourage everybody to go listen to some of the music that you've played on, because you're quite a musician.
Oh, thank you.
And you've done a lot. And it's really a blast to have you on the show finally. So thank you for making the time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. And thank you, everybody, for joining Dave and I for the last hour and change. We all appreciate you. Stay safe, everybody.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Womack.